Well, hello and welcome to our show where you are going to be getting some gold nuggets that you might want to just stash away and pull out at the most opportune times. So, welcome to our show. I am Charmaine Tanner, and I host this weekly the Art of Advocacy show. So, parents, educators, self advocates can get information, advice, ideas, and not just from me, but from our viewers. So, we count on our audience, all our wonderful people that join us either live on the replay to make comments, ask questions, give ideas to people, because this is much more fun when we can do it together, right? So, if you remember, 1 year ago today, it was our presidential inauguration day, which was a pretty special moment in history. And if you remember, there was one certain senator, if I can talk, there was one certain senator last year at inauguration. I can't say these words today. Um, and he was, I don't know, you saw his photo everywhere. So I just wanted to share with you today that, yes, indeed, that my friend, Senator um, Bernie, is available for IEP meetings. So I just thought I would reshare this. This was my most popular share for the whole year last year. But yes, every once in a while, I do call on Bernie to come and help out at some IEP meetings. So let me know if you'd love who you would love to bring to an IEP meeting to give you some extra support. Um, Today, we're going to be talking about letters from the Federal Department of Education. And the specific department that we're going to be talking about is the Office of Special Education Programs, otherwise known as OSEP. And OSEP has many different policy letters, letters of guidance, other kinds of frequently asked questions, and especially during COVID, the past couple of years, they've produced quite a few guidance documents and FAQs around COVID and compensatory education. We are going to look at a few letters of guidance from OSEP today. And the reason why I say I think they're gold is because they can be helpful for you when you're planning, your information that you're going to share, planning strategies that you're going to be using as you're advocating for your child. Or if you're an advocate like Renee, hey Renee, Renee is an advocate in the Chicago area. So glad you're here with us today, Renee. We're going to be looking past Bernie and we're going to be going on to a reminder that I'm not an attorney and I can't give any legal advice. And always, always, always check your state and local regulations because what we're going to be talking about today is guidance from the federal level, but you may be living in a state that gives you even more rights than what the federal government does. So when we talk about letters from OSEP, that's guidance on a federal level. But again, you really have to check your own state regulations. So one of the things that you'll notice when you read letters of guidance from OSEP is they always talk about, this is just informal guidance. It's not legally binding. And so that's an important concept for parents to remember. Yes, these letters are helpful, But we can't say, well, OSEP said this in October of 2017, and expect people to see that as something that's legally binding. Um, Angie, Angie says, hello, I always forget these are available. Yes. Um, so do you mean the OSEP letters or a weekly show? But yeah, so we're going to go over a few of the letters today. I have the address here, the link, and if, let's see, we could probably go over there now if I can share my other screen. Um, because sometimes it's nice just to see what that website looks like. So here we are. If you can just type in idea.ed.gov and you'll get here. And you'll see they have law and policy. They have the statute and regulations. So this is handy dandy when you want to look up a certain regulation. You can either type in the regulation number that you're looking for or the topic that you're looking for, and it will pull it up. Or you can go over here to policy documents, and that's where you'll find policy letters, policy support documents, all from OSEP. And again, you can search, and here at the top, you can type in a specific name that there's a letter of guidance, connected with that name, or you can type in a topic and they'll show you lots of letters in that category. The other thing is they have two tabs, one from 2001 to present, and then previous to 2001. So in our previous administration, the Secretary of Education deleted some older documents, and we were kind of all worried about that. But I think some of them were really outdated and they were fine to be deleted. So I think the important ones we can still see here. So let's go over here and see what our first letter is going to be. So I have to stop sharing that. I have to go back to sharing my PowerPoint. So the first case that we're going to talk about today is letter to Brittany N. Mills from May 2nd, 2019. And the question was, if a parent requests an evaluation, can the district refuse to do the evaluation if they do not suspect the child has a disability? Now, I get this a lot sometimes from new parents, and I think there's a perception that if you ask for an evaluation, the district has to do it. Well, that could be in your state, and that's why you want to look at your state regs. However, from a federal level, this is the guidance that we get from OSEP. And they said if the LEA, which is your local education agency, we just kind of think of that as our district, if the LEA believes an evaluation is not necessary because the child is not suspected of having a disability, it must issue written notice to the parent explaining why it is refusing to evaluate the child. So, yes, the school district could say no. They could say, we don't think there's evidence that your child has a disability. I'm not sure how often they refuse to do evaluations when parent requests it, because I think they're really worried about what are the consequences of that. But it is possible. The key thing that you want to remember is if the school district does refuse to identify your child, look at specific needs that your child has, any kind of things like that, or if you think there's been a lack of faith provided. All of those are triggers for a prior written notice. So you want to make sure if your district would refuse an evaluation that they have to follow up with a prior written notice saying what documents, evidence did they consider before they made their decision, why they made that decision. And that's an area that I see a lot of schools not doing that follow up with prior written notice. So you want to make sure that happens for you. And let's go on to another one. This is Letter to Anonymous from September 9th, 2019. And the question was, is there a legal obligation or requirement for parents to receive the evaluation report prior to the IEP meeting? And of course, like I said, depending on what state you live in, this could certainly be what would be required. From the federal level, this is what OSEP tells us. A copy of the evaluation report must be provided at no cost to the parents. However, neither IDEA nor its implementing regulations establish a timeline for providing a copy of the evaluation report or the documentation of determination of eligibility to parents. So, again, there are some states that will say, they'll even give a timeline for when parents have to receive documents before meetings. And so if that is happening for you in your state, then you need to take that into account. So Marion's here from Maryland, and now I have to get my cursor is like disappeared. So it's like, where am I? So usually when I'm working with families, and if their state doesn't give a specific timeline when you have to get something like the evaluation report, I still think it's helpful for parents to make a written request that they receive, and I call it a draft evaluation report, that they receive the draft evaluation report so many days a week, whatever, before the IEP meeting, before the evaluation meeting. So that's the problem, right? There's all these little loopholes. Yes, IDEA says parents have to have a copy. They can have a copy of the evaluation report, but there's no timeline. So it's like, well, when do they get it? But go ahead and make that request. And I find that most districts are helpful and will send that to you. So let me know if that's true. Dan is an advocate in Illinois. Dan, I haven't seen you in so long. He says Illinois passed a law requiring written material to be provided at least 3 school days in advance, and it has been so helpful in helping parents come prepared to advocate and collaborate. Yeah, and I noticed that because I was working with a family in Chicago, and yeah, and their district policy is that they do it 5 days, even though the state law that was passed said 3. So look at your state regulations, look at your local policy and practices, because you might even have further rights through your local school district, which might sound kind of, I've never heard of that. And Lissa is in Idaho, and Lissa says, I've always received the evaluation report at the IEP meeting. Yeah, and that's the problem, right? It's just like receiving a copy of a draft IEP at the meeting. You don't have time to process it. And you want to be able to have some good input in the evaluation meeting. Hopefully you have sent your parent input as far as what you see your child as far as what their strengths and needs are, and you've contributed that to the evaluation report because parents are a member of the evaluation team. But yeah, so it's always helpful, I think, to ask for things that you really need. So let's go back here. And this is a letter that we talked about last week, but if you missed our show last week, I wanted to bring it back because it's one of my favorites. It's a letter to Ellen Chambers from May 9th, 2012. And the question was, it's really not phrased as a question, but it's like, oh, we already do that. Oh, we do that for all our students. We don't have to write that in the IEP. And if you were with us last week, you know that OSEP's guidance says the fact that some of those services may also be considered best teaching practices or part of the district's regular education program does not preclude those services from meeting the definition of special education or related services and being included in the child's IEP. So this one, I think we hear more often because a lot of school districts are implementing things like universal design for learning. And so some of that is like, we do that every day for all of our kids. However, if your child has an IEP, you want to make sure that even if those things that they do every day for all the kids in the classroom, if that is something that your child needs in order to access, be involved, and make progress in the general ed curriculum, you still want those written in your IEP. Because who knows if the district policy changes on things and no longer is every teacher doing that for all the kids in the class. You don't know if you're going to be moving to another district and they don't have that same best teaching practice in every general ed classroom. So when you hear people say, oh, we don't need to write that in the IEP, we already do that. You could just like remind them in a nice, friendly way that actually there is some guidance from OSEP that says, no, if that's what your child needs for specially designed services, if that's a related type of service, you still want to put it in the IEP. So keep giving us your questions and comments. Have you ever come across a situation like this where the district is reluctant to write down everything that really needs to happen? Dan says, we may move during the year, and I want to make sure that all of the wonderful things that you do support Johnny is documented so the next school year will know what he needs. See how diplomatic Dan is? So everybody write down Dan's suggested wording there. Yeah, and so that would be a nice way that you're not confrontational about it, but you just still want to make sure that it actually happens, right? Okie dokie. So if you missed the beginning, just a reminder, I'm not an attorney. I can't give legal advice. Always check your state and local regulations. That's our commercial message. Our next letter from OSEP was to Sarah Mamas from May 26, 2004. And the question was, does IDEA guarantee parents and their representatives a reasonable opportunity to observe their child's classrooms and propose placement options? So I'm going to pause for a drink of water. What do you think? Does IDEA guarantee parents can go observe? Observing at your child's school or classroom can sometimes be a little adversarial. Usually the district has a form that you need to fill out within 24 hours. Lissa says no, that they don't have that right to observe. And it's like so sad because look here. OSEP says IDEA doesn't provide a general entitlement for parents of children with disabilities or their professional representatives to observe their children in any current classroom or proposed educational placement. Um, so, observations, let us know. Is that a problem for families in your area, or are schools pretty willing to allow parents to come in and observe? The other thing that's important to remember about observations, especially if you've asked for an independent education evaluation, um, and the school has previously done observations for their evaluation, their assessments, then you really need to make sure that the person doing your independent education evaluation also has the same professional courtesy, the same right for them to be observing if it's for an independent education evaluation. So, yeah, there's all kinds of things. Usually, there's other avenues that you can pursue when you're wanting to observe in a school, observe your child. Sometimes you'll get pushbacks from schools that will say, well, it's a privacy issue. We really can't have, parents seeing the other students that are on IEPs. And there's really no right to privacy when you're in public schools. And I mean, you look at how many people volunteer, maybe not as much now because of COVID, but they do have classroom volunteers. They do have, parents that will help in the lunchroom or with class parties. And so there are many situations during the school year when other parents are in the building. And so I wouldn't, let that deter you if that's something that you want to do. Abby, hey, she's from Kentucky. She says they don't like or let parents to come observe, but have left or let outside personnel from Down Syndrome Association or Children's Hospital specialists to observe. Yes, and Abby lives near Cincinnati, so they have a Down syndrome clinic there, and they, in her experience, they have let professionals come in. And I know a lot of parents have said, if I go in there, my kids are not going to be how they typically are. So sometimes parents will want someone else, like an advocate, to go and observe. Yeah, Dan says COVID has certainly made more things complicated. Yes, for sure. Um, and there's a lot of policy statements and FAQs on the OSEP website about COVID and compensatory ed. And the bottom line is that your child still is entitled to a free, appropriate public education, whether or not they have teachers in the classroom, whether or not they have to go virtual again. That entitlement to FAPE still exists for your child. So let us continue on our merry way here. A letter here. This is another one of my favorites. It's the question of, can a parent of a child with a disability request an independent education evaluation in an area that was not previously assessed by the school district's evaluation? And the guidance is, when an evaluation is conducted and a parent disagrees with the evaluation because a child was not assessed in a particular area, the parent has the right to request an IEE to assess the child in that area. So this has come up in different states where I've been advocating with parents, and what you'll usually hear back from a district is, well, we didn't assess in that area. You have to give us a chance to do the assessment first before you can ask for the IEE. However, this specific case is an example where the school district did complete their assessment. They wrote their evaluation report, and they completely missed doing any kind of evaluation in a specific area for a child. And in that case, this guidance is telling us that yes, they had their chance. Sometimes you'll hear it like one bite of the apple. I don't know. They had their chance to assess your child in all areas of suspected disability. And if they chose for some reason not to assess in all areas, you can, as a parent, ask for an independent education evaluation. And the trick with IEEs, there's several tricks, is one, the school district just has to consider the results from the IEE. So if you get these wonderful recommendations from a private person that did the assessment, the school district doesn't necessarily have to include those suggestions in your child's IEP. The other trick to IEEs is for parents to understand that the district, once they get your written request for this independent education evaluation, they have two choices. One, they can say yes, and we're going to pay for the evaluation, or they could say two, no, we think our evaluation was complete and acceptable or whatever. We are not going to pay. Well, if you get a no answer, the district has to file for due process and prove to a hearing officer that their assessment was complete and valid. So if they say no, they just don't say no and then it goes away. They say no and then they file for due process. I've seen more districts in the past few years file for due process over independent education evaluations as almost a strategy to call the parents' bluff and to see, like, are they serious enough to push this. So just always expect and be ready, I guess, like Pete Wright tells us, to be able to pursue other options to get things resolved when you get no's and when you get roadblocks. Tamara, hey there. Tamara is from Massachusetts. Look at all the states that are represented. She says, can the parent ask the IEP team to review an older outside evaluation, no less than 1 year, instead of paying for an IEE? Oh, that would be interesting. So, Tamara, I would, say one, check Massachusetts state regs. But I don't know. I think it sounds reasonable because I always suggest to parents, if their child's receiving any kind of private related services outside of the school, that they share those reports that their private OT or their private SLP writes, and also to see if there can't be a relationship and a connection built between the school, related service providers and the private ones. So yeah, but I'm sure, Tamara, it would be the same, that all they have to do is consider it. But, part of the evaluation process is to look at all the evidence and documentation that the evaluation team has. And so parents, because you're a part of that evaluation team, you can always share private, testing that you've had done with the school team. And that becomes part of the documentation that can become part of your child's educational record, right? So Tori, let's see Hey, we are currently going through this with our district. We requested IEE and they filed due process. We are in Texas and the first time the district has denied IEE. Yikes. Yeah. So, um, in Texas, there are a lot of advocates that will help parents go through that due process part. So if you're considering to still do due process, you could in Texas look at advocates that have experience with due process hearings, or you could look at attorneys. Um, if you need some advice, or I don't know, not advice, if you need like a listing of people that are available in Texas, let me know. COPA has a directory of advocates and attorneys in states. Pete Wright has the yellow pages that gives that too. Oh, good. Oh, good. Um, so Tori says we have an advocate and attorney. We filed counterclaim now. Yeah. So Tori, come back and give us an update on things. Yeah, it's a mess. Well, what's so surprising for me when I look at Texas, is it TEA, their website for like their State Department in Texas, they have like some of the best resources on there. For most of them are for teachers, but parents can also learn a lot from their resources. The problem is, like, hardly any, I don't know, not hardly anybody, a lot of people, a lot of, districts in Texas aren't exactly implementing all these good ideas that their State Department has listed. We know Texas has been kind of famous for, like controlling how many kids get into special ed, and have had some major, compliance problems statewide. And I think it just kind of keeps, settling, right? I don't know. Marion, I have to keep putting my glasses on. Our IEP team will review assessments and determine whether or not to accept or not. Yeah, so that's good that they're actually looking at them, because again, different words have different meanings. So in the IDEA regulations, it says that districts have to consider an outside evaluation. And I think most districts that I've worked with have been very willing to read outside reports and really, think about them and think of, how could we include some of this information. The other thing that you can look at doing is writing and asking that these, private evaluations that you have are part of your child's education records, and that they have copies. You can have things in the IEP that says, refer to this evaluation on this date or whatever. So there are ways that you can still incorporate some of that. But yeah, there's no binding responsibility that the district would have to do that. So let's go back here. And I have to remember if I have another one or not. Nope. Let's stay connected. And speaking of being connected, if you get my weekly emails, tomorrow morning, you'll be getting an email from me with the basically kind of like a copy of the slides with some additional information. I'll also list some links in the handout that I'll be emailing out tomorrow with other key policy statements and guidance from OSEP. There are ones on discipline. There are ones on, using the D word, dyslexia. Like I said earlier a lot of information about COVID and how your child is still entitled to FAPE. So I'll put all those links in the email for tomorrow. If you don't get my weekly emails, you can sign up here, iep.today/weekly adv tips. So as I said, we are here every Thursday, and let us know, do you have any other comments? Hey, Cheryl from Pennsylvania. Look at, we got Wisconsin. You're probably excited about the Packers game. Yes, Marion's from Maryland. Look at all the people we have. So let's see. I want to make sure I haven't missed. Yeah. So Karen was saying, can I show your comment? Why isn't it showing? She said COVID has made this even. Oh, that's Dan. But Karen said they are desperate for subs now in our schools. Yeah. And I was just, and I think that's something that's impacting everyone, right? I mean, classes are combining when they don't have enough subs. Some schools are closing for a few days to hopefully get teachers back in good health. So all of that is really impacting everybody, right? Hey, Joanne, she is from Maryland too. So any other comments or questions? Next week, next Thursday, we will do an open Q&A because I want you to have an opportunity to ask questions, to think, get ideas from other people about certain situations that you're having. So join us again next Thursday at noon Mountain Time. And February, we have some wonderful guest speakers that you will for sure want to get in on those. So I will let you have some more time on your Thursday afternoon here. If you are a Trailblazer, a member in our Trailblazer group, about 1:15 Mountain Time, we will have our after the show in our Trailblazer group. So Donna, so she was saying, can you post the links in the comments? So what link were you looking at? Because the other thing, the general link, let me see here if I can bring this. The general link I shared on a slide here at the beginning. So let me bring this back up. But if you go to idea.ed.gov, you can find all the policy letters there. And this is a specific link where you can go and see the policy letters. But if you go to ed.gov/IDEA, you'll get the policy letters, and you'll also get the law, the statute, and the regulations from IDEA. So is that the link? The tips. So the tips will be in my weekly email. So this is where you can sign up, and I can put that in the comments too. So onward. I hope that January has been a wonderful month so far, and you're looking forward to the rest of the school year, because we need to make sure that every day counts for our kids, and that they're learning, that they're supported, that they're happy, that they're safe at school every day. I would love for you to be one of our regular viewers. I also, do one-on-one help with parents, and we have our Trailblazer group. So there are a number of ways that we can stay connected and that you can get the support that you need. So until next week, you guys have a wonderful Thursday, and we'll be back.